Hey everybody, this is lesson 4, the angle addition postulate. Similar to last lesson, instead of segments though, we're looking at angles. So let's get started. An angle, and there's a symbol for angle. It kind of looks like the less than symbol, but it's a little bit more slanted. That's the symbol. An angle is formed by two rays. We did rays a couple lessons ago. It's formed by two rays that have the same endpoint. Now, that endpoint is called the vertex. Hopefully you've heard that word before. So here's a picture of an angle in the first example. The rays that make up this angle. So one of them starts at B, goes in the direction of T. And the other one starts at B and goes in the direction of Q. So BT and BQ, those are your two rays that are making up your angle. The end point, or it's like really just the point of the angle, that's going to be your vertex, and that's B in this example. Not too complicated so far. We talked about in the first couple lessons how important naming is in geometry. It applies to angles as well. You'll be asked to name angles on a lot of questions. There's actually 4 ways to name this angle right here. It is always safe to use 3 letters when you name an angle. So if I were to do that, here's what that would look like. I could name this angle TBQ, and I'm going to use the angle symbol. I could go the other way and say QBT. So there's 2 ways to name it with 3 letters. This angle specifically, I could also just use the vertex to name it. So the vertex is B. It works to call this angle angle B. That does not always work. 3 letters to name always works. Not always 1. I'll show you why in a minute. The 4th way is sometimes they'll put a little number inside the angle. If they do that, you can call it angle 1 or angle whatever the number is. Note that when you're naming angles and you're using 3 letters to name it, the vertex always has to be the middle letter. So like these first 2, when I said TBQ and QBT, B, my vertex, always landed in the middle. Okay, so pay attention to that. Let's do an example, another one. So example 2 is a little bit more complicated. There are multiple angles in this picture instead of just one. So the first thing they want me to do is name angle 1 in another way. So here's angle 1, this guy right here. I know it's always safe to use 3 letters, so I'm going to call this ABC. Vertex is B, put that in the middle. You could also say CBA. All right, you guys are going to tell me a way to name angle 2. As far as number 3 goes, here's where I'm proving to you that it's not always safe to use 1 letter to name an angle. 3 says name angle B in another way. Well, here's B. It's the vertex of all of these angles here, but that's the exact problem. If they just say B, I don't know what angle you're talking about. Are you talking about this one? Are you talking about this one? Because that has a vertex of B as well. Are you talking about the entire thing? I don't know. So if there's multiple angles using the same vertex or multiple angles in the same picture, 1 letter is just not going to work. It's not specific enough. Number 4, I kind of just touched on this, but how many angles are in this picture? Well, there's actually 3. There's the 2 smaller ones, and then there's the whole thing. Okay, at the bottom here, hopefully this is just review. You do all of this in middle school. Not to say I hold you to like remembering things, but when you're classifying angles, you're just giving them names. So there's 4 angle names we're going to look at today. The first angle is a right angle. And I'll just draw a picture. That's a right angle. It's always going to have, not always, but a lot of times it has that little square in the bottom corner to tell you that it's right. And right angles measure or equal exactly 90 degrees. So when we talk angles, we measure them in degrees. Acute angles, so it's like, oh, it's so cute. They're very small. They measure between 0 degrees and 90 degrees. So there's a big range. Any angle that measures between 0 and 90 is called acute. Obtuse lies on the other end of the range here. These are much bigger. These are between 90 and 180. And again, hopefully you've heard those before and kind of remember a little bit about angles. If you don't, that's okay. Got you covered. The last type is a straight angle, and it's just a line. Straight angles are just lines. If you don't know this, lock it in right now. This is helpful. Straight angles are exactly 180 degrees. Remember that. All right, on the back, let me brighten myself up here. On the back, the angle addition postulate. So let's really get into like what the lesson's about here. There's two scenarios with the angle addition postulate. The first one, if B is on the interior or inside angle AOC, then here's what you know. And this is super mathy. Write it down and I'll explain. Angle AOB plus angle BOC equals angle AOC. This says the same thing that the segment addition postulate says. And I wrote it down here. It just means like this part plus this part equals the whole thing. So all I just wrote was if I do this angle plus this angle, it should equal the degrees of the entire angle. Scenario 2 is the same idea, except this one involves a straight angle or a line. So if your overall angle is just a line, then you know that the two parts added together, AOB and BOC, instead of saying they equal AOC, I know for a fact AOC is 180 on this because it's a line. So I can just say the two parts added together equal 180. Okay, so those are the two scenarios you're going to see. Let's jump into a couple examples. So example 1 says, answer the question, given that it's got this little M here, that just means measure. And measure just means degrees. So they're just telling me DBC is 24 degrees. Then they tell me the measure or the degrees of ABD, and be careful like picking out where these are. A, B, D. That's just the whole thing. That's 83 degrees. So I just have to figure out how big, what's the measure of CBA, this little guy. Well, I think a lot of us, and I'll be mathy because that's kind of my job. If I wrote out like this, the angle addition postulate, I would say, okay, well, if I take DBC and I add it to CBA, if I add those two angle parts together, it should equal the whole thing, angle DBA. You don't have to write that. That's crazy. That just is too time consuming. I think most of us would say, all right, 24 degrees is this small one. I don't know CBA, but I do know the whole thing. So what they add to be should be 83. A lot of us probably wouldn't even need to write that down. We maybe would just pull out our calculator and say, oh, okay, well, if I do the whole thing minus this part, whatever's left over, that's going to be that other angle. And it is. You'll hear me say this a lot. Do not overcomplicate things. It's not worth it. So the answer is just 59. Okay, example 2 and 3, we get into algebra. Make your teachers last year proud. So instead of keeping it simple and just telling me how many degrees the angles are, they throw X in because they want you to solve equations. So this is good practice, keeps our skills sharp. Notice they gave us some given information. You always want to write that on the picture to kind of help you. Whoa, sorry. So RQS, that angle is 5x minus 13. So RQS, this guy right here, is 5x minus 13. TQS, that's the other part here. That's 3x plus 1. Definitely get those labels on there. I want to figure out x. They did not tell me how big the whole thing was on here, but I don't need to know that because I see that the whole thing is just a line, and I know that there's 180 degrees in a line. So I know if I add these two parts together, 5x minus 13 plus 3x plus 1, those guys together make 180. Okay, I'm going to start you solving this. I'm going to combine some like terms. I'm going to combine the x's and the coefficient, which is just the numbers. That would be 8x's minus 12. Go ahead and finish solving this and see what you get for x. Okay, number 2 says classify each angle. Classify just means name it, acute, right, or obtuse. So if you didn't get this, jot it down. X was 24 on that last question. When you go to name, you base it off of the degree, not by how it looks. So RQS, it looks obtuse, but I want to verify that with numbers. So 5x minus 13 was what that angle equaled. I now know that x is 24. So I'm going to plug in 24 where x is and actually figure out, okay, that angle is 107 degrees. And I know, if I need to flip back, if it's between 90 and 180, I call it obtuse, which is what this guy is. Okay, tell me what you would classify angle SQT as. Then let's finish off with example 3. So same idea, I've got multiple angles here. They gave me some information. The first was that angle AOD, which is the whole thing, is 107. Always label on the picture. Then they tell me kind of some weird information here. More algebra, yay. They tell me that angle BOC, this guy right here, is 3 more than double angle AOB. Yikes. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. So the angle they're using to describe angle BOC is AOB. I don't know how big that is. So I'm just going to call that guy X. If you don't know something in math, call it X. Label it on your picture. Okay, check it out. See this mark and this mark? Those marks mean congruent. So if this one's X, that one's X. Okay, I'm getting somewhere now. Now go back to this guy right here. So BOC is. Is means equals. I don't know if anybody remembers that from like algebra. It's kind of like the beginning of the year. You see that a lot. So BOC should equal, and then I need to write an expression to represent the rest of it. 3 more than double what I called X. So 3 more than double X would be 2X plus 3. Or you could flip that around and say 3 plus 2X. Same thing. Yuck. This is tough. But that's BOC in the middle. So I'm going to label that. If you get lost, it's not the end of the world, but do your best to kind of hang on to this one. Okay, now I'm ready. Now that everything's labeled, I'm ready to write an equation to solve for X. And I know if I've got a picture like this with multiple parts, I need to add all the parts together and set it equal to the entire thing. So I'm going to do X plus 2X plus 3 plus X, add all 3 parts, set it equal to 107. Okay, so let's solve this. Let's combine the X's. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 X's plus 3 equals 107. Then I would just subtract the 3 over and divide it by 4. Hopefully that's not too fast. X would be 26. Now I can go in and say how many degrees. That's what they want right here. It should say like the measure. So you're like, you know for sure that's what they want you to do, not name it. But I want the measure, how many degrees are all of these angles. So let's do BOC. So BOC, that's the middle 2X plus 3 guy. So I'm going to do 2 times 26, because that's what X was. So that guy's 55 degrees. Running out of room here. BOD, so BOD, I guess, okay, look at my picture. This guy is 55, and I know X is 26. So BOD is these two together, so I just have to do 55 plus 26, and that's 81. And then the last one, AOC, my picture is getting super cluttered. All right, battery, that's my battery.